Imagine waking up one day and every fragment of your past, every glance, every whispered word, every fleeting smile, replays itself with unrelenting clarity. Not just the major events, the heartbreaks or triumphs, but the minutiae, the way your mother's hand trembled as she poured tea, the smell of old leather in your father's study, the subtle shift in a friend's tone that hinted at betrayal you never acknowledged at the time. It's as if your mind has become an unyielding archivist, storing not only the experiences you wanted to remember, but those you didn't. Now consider this paradox. Why do some people carry the weight of every memory, while others live their lives in relative oblivion, forgetting as easily as clouds dissolve in the sky? What force decides which moments will haunt us, and which will slip quietly into the abyss? The question is not merely about memory. It is about identity, consciousness, and the invisible architecture of the mind. You might think it's a blessing, this perfect recall. After all, to remember everything could seem like mastery over life, an ultimate form of awareness. But is it truly mastery, or is it a kind of imprisonment? Each memory, no matter how small, is a thread tying you to the past. And when those threads multiply beyond comprehension, they can tangle, constricting the present, shaping the lens through which you see the world, influencing your desires, fears, and choices without your consent. Think about the times you've tried to forget something, only to find it returning unbidden in the quiet moments, when you are alone, when your mind should be free. This involuntary recall is not random. It is selective, strategic, and deeply revealing. Carl Jung suggested that the psyche harbors a shadow, a repository of suppressed experiences and unconscious impulses. Perhaps these vivid memories, these relentless echoes, are not merely accidents of recollection but manifestations of that shadow, demanding acknowledgement, refusing to remain hidden. But there is a deeper, more unsettling question. What if our very perception of reality is filtered through the memories we cannot release? If one man remembers every detail, every nuance, does he live in a more authentic world, or in a hall of mirrors, where the past continuously reflects and distorts the present? Imagine walking through life with every slight, every act of kindness, every betrayal etched into the walls of your consciousness. How do you distinguish between truth and interpretation, between what happened and what your mind insists happened? And yet, it is not just about memory. It is about the hidden forces that govern it. Why do certain moments embed themselves in your mind while others fade? Why do some people remember pain with surgical precision, while joy slips like sand through their fingers? There is a pattern here, a psychological, almost metaphysical rhythm that dictates what we carry and what we discard. Jung would call it the individuation process, a journey towards self-realization where the shadow confronts the conscious ego. But what if this journey is forced upon some more relentlessly than others? Consider the implications. A man who remembers every moment is not merely recalling facts. He is reliving emotions, intentions, and subtleties that others might overlook. His consciousness is an archive, but also a battlefield. Every memory has a weight. Every recollection shapes his choices, his desires, his very sense of who he is. And if the mind is burdened in this way, can freedom ever truly exist? Can one act spontaneously when the ghosts of every decision past hover overhead, whispering, correcting, accusing? This is the tension we must face. The interplay between memory and meaning, between what we know consciously and what lurks beneath, shaping our lives invisibly. To understand why someone remembers every moment is to confront the hidden mechanisms of the mind itself. The interplay of conscious awareness, unconscious impulses, and the subtle psychological forces that mold identity. So I ask you, if you could remember every moment of your life with perfect clarity, would you truly be free, or would you be captive to the unyielding weight of your own experience? Is this clarity a gift, or is it a kind of curse we are too afraid to name? And perhaps most importantly, what does it reveal about the hidden factors that govern our minds, our choices, and the way we perceive reality? In the coming exploration, we will delve into the forces that shape memory, identity, and consciousness, guided by the insights of Jung and the quiet truths that linger in the corners of the psyche. But first, we must confront the hidden problem that lies beneath our very awareness, a force that silently dictates which moments we remember and how those moments define us. Beneath the surface of perfect recall lies a hidden architecture of the mind, one that is rarely acknowledged, yet shapes every experience, every reaction, every choice. Memory is not merely a storage system. It is a living, dynamic force, intertwined with the deepest currents of your psyche. And within this force exists a problem, subtle yet profound. The mind does not simply record events. It interprets, judges, and encodes them according to psychological and unconscious imperatives. Carl Jung described the psyche as composed of multiple layers, the conscious ego and the unconscious shadow being central among them. The shadow contains the experiences, impulses, and emotions we refuse to recognize, often because they threaten our self-image or our social identity. But when the shadow refuses to remain hidden, it surfaces in memory, insistent and precise. A man who remembers every moment is, in effect, in constant dialogue with his shadow, whether he knows it or not. Each memory is a mirror reflecting parts of himself that he may have suppressed, avoided, or denied. The very act of remembering, then, becomes both revelation and burden. This burden is amplified by the cognitive architecture of human memory. Neuroscience reveals that our brains do not store memories like files in a cabinet. They store them as networks of emotion, sensation, and meaning. Emotional intensity acts as a magnifying glass, amplifying some experiences while relegating others to oblivion. Pain, trauma, awe, betrayal, and passion are etched deeply, whereas routine or joy without intensity may evaporate quickly. This selective process is not fair, nor is it rational. It is evolutionary. The mind prioritizes survival and meaning over completeness. Yet, for some, this selective amplification becomes extreme. Every slight, every misstep, every word spoken in anger or tenderness is seared into consciousness with surgical precision. Philosophers have long grappled with the consequences of such unyielding memory. Friedrich Nietzsche warned of the dangers of active forgetting, the necessary act of letting go to avoid being consumed by the past. Without forgetting, one cannot live freely. One is perpetually anchored to every failure, every humiliation, every choice made under fear or ignorance. Conversely, memory, unchecked and total, creates a life in which the past is not a lesson but a tyrant. To remember everything is to live with relentless accountability, not merely to oneself, but to the hidden, unacknowledged aspects of one's psyche. Jean-Paul Sartre would describe this as a confrontation with radical freedom. If every moment is remembered, the man is constantly aware of his own agency and the consequences of his actions. There is no escape, no room to pretend that ignorance can absolve responsibility. In this sense, the hidden problem is not memory itself. It is the relentless self-reflection imposed by memory, a force that exposes the totality of human freedom while simultaneously threatening the fragile structures of identity. There is also a social dimension to consider. Our minds are shaped not only by internal forces, but by external pressures, cultural expectations, societal norms, and relational dynamics. Memory becomes a lens through which we measure ourselves against the world. Every remembered slight or insult is a narrative thread linking us to perceived injustices, shaping future interactions with suspicion or defensiveness. Every recalled act of kindness or love becomes both a treasure and a trap, reminding us of what is absent now or what might never return. Here, memory enforces both the private shadow and the social self, a dual architecture that is invisible yet profoundly influential. Viktor Frankl, in his exploration of meaning under extreme conditions, illuminates another hidden layer. Memory, especially when unrelenting, can become a vehicle for existential reflection. For some, recalling every moment is a form of silent questioning. Why me? Why this? What am I to make of it all? But without a framework to integrate these experiences, without meaning, memory turns into an incessant echo chamber, replaying every minor detail as if to demand comprehension that cannot be satisfied. This is the psychological root of what might appear as perfect recall. Not a gift, but a relentless internal interrogation, a mind seeking closure from the chaos of lived experience. And yet, we rarely speak of this problem because it is invisible to the casual observer. Those who remember every moment often appear simply meticulous, attentive, or even obsessive. But underneath lies a complex interplay of shadow, cognition, and existential inquiry, a hidden force shaping behavior, relationships, and self-perception. It is this force that makes memory not just a record of the past, but an active participant in the shaping of identity. So we arrive at a paradox. The very faculty that allows awareness and insight, the gift of memory, also creates vulnerability. It is not simply the remembering that is the problem, but the unconscious processes that dictate what is remembered, how it is interpreted, and how it influences the self. Herein lies the psychological trap. Memory, untempered and unintegrated, becomes both teacher and tormentor. It insists on relevance, demands meaning, and leaves the mind exposed to the weight of every moment, without respite or escape. In the next section, we will see how this hidden force manifests in ways most cannot perceive, shaping behaviors, relationships, and even entire societies without notice. The consequences are subtle, pervasive, and often destructive, yet invisible until illuminated. Only by confronting the unseen patterns of memory and shadow can one begin to understand the full magnitude of what it means to remember everything. Memory is never neutral. Every recollection is a ripple in the pond of consciousness, subtle but unstoppable, shaping perception, judgment, and action. For a man who remembers everything, the consequences are not merely internal. They extend outward, influencing his relationships, decisions, and even the culture in which he exists. And yet, these effects are invisible, almost imperceptible to those around him. They are the unseen consequences, the quiet architecture of influence that molds behavior without consent or awareness. Consider the psychological ramifications first. Neuroscience tells us that memory is deeply intertwined with emotion. Each vivid memory carries its original affective weight. The tension, joy, fear, or shame remains embedded as if the moment were still present. This means that recalling a minor slight from years ago can provoke the same physiological response as if it were happening now. The body remembers before the mind does. In everyday life, this translates into overreactions, anticipatory anxiety, or subtle avoidance behaviors that others cannot trace to their origin. To an outside observer, the man may seem irritable, overly cautious, or reactive, but they cannot see the invisible library of past moments that silently drives these behaviors. Cultural conditioning amplifies these consequences. Society rewards forgetting and forgiving, or at least the appearance of it. To hold on to every slight, every injustice, every micro-moment of humiliation, is to exist partially outside social norms. Relationships become strained because others cannot comprehend the weight the man carries. Friends forget what they said. Lovers move on from minor disputes, yet he remembers with precision. Small betrayals are not forgotten. They are catalogued, compared, and unconsciously used to navigate future interactions. This creates a tension between internal reality and external perception, a silent dissonance that isolates as much as it defines. Then there is the cognitive burden. Human memory is not limitless. Yet for some, the mind acts as though it must remember every nuance. This hyperattentiveness can lead to what psychologists call cognitive load, an oversaturation of working memory that impedes decision-making, creativity, and emotional resilience. A man who remembers every moment may excel at recalling facts, but struggle to respond fluidly to new situations. Each decision is haunted by precedent, by the ghosts of what has come before. Paradoxically, this gift of memory, meant to enhance life, can constrain it, creating indecision and hesitation where spontaneity is required. The societal consequences extend even further. Imagine a workplace, a friendship circle, or a family unit where one person recalls everything with perfect fidelity. Social dynamics become distorted. Innocuous comments are remembered as slights. Minor favors are catalogued with unspoken expectation. Others unconsciously adjust, tiptoeing around a consciousness that cannot release the past. The man's memory subtly alters the group's behavior, shaping norms and interactions without anyone consciously realizing it. Memory, in this sense, is not merely personal. It is social, a hidden force that structures human networks as surely as laws or customs. There is also a philosophical dimension to these unseen consequences. Jean-Paul Sartre suggested that humans exist in a constant state of self-consciousness, aware that they are observed and judged by others. But what happens when one's own memory refuses to let go of judgment? Every action, every word, is measured against a personal archive of experience. Freedom becomes both heightened and constrained. The man who remembers everything experiences a form of self-surveillance, so acute that even minor impulses are scrutinized against an exhaustive ledger of past choices. What should be spontaneous becomes premeditated. What should be playful becomes calculated. The unseen consequence is not merely memory. It is a radical hyperconsciousness that transforms the experience of living itself. Cognitive biases intensify this effect. Confirmation bias, hindsight bias, and negativity bias all find fertile ground in a mind saturated with memory. Every recalled event is colored by interpretation, emotion, and expectation. The past is never objectively recorded. It is continually reconstructed to fit narrative needs. A man who remembers everything may believe he is observing reality as it was, but in truth, he is constantly negotiating between what happened, what he felt, and what he now believes it means. The consequence is a perception of life that feels absolute, yet is subtly distorted, an unseen filter shaping thought, judgment, and emotion. Even morality is affected. Viktor Frankl observed that meaning is discovered, not imposed, yet a memory-laden mind is always searching for coherence, always demanding lessons from events, often creating moral frameworks that are hyper-rigid or unforgiving. Minor mistakes or betrayals may be magnified into life-defining events, not because they truly deserve it, but because memory refuses to allow them to fade. The man becomes both a chronicler and a judge of his own life and the lives of those around him, the unseen consequences rippling into relationships and social perception alike. And perhaps the most insidious consequence is existential. Memory anchors identity, yet when it is unrelenting, it can also imprison identity. Every self-concept is tested against every remembered event, every failure, every triumph, every nuance of social interaction. Self-deception becomes impossible, illusion unsustainable. The man who remembers everything cannot escape himself. The mind becomes both witness and jailer, and the unseen consequence is a life lived perpetually in the tension between self-knowledge and self-liberation. In the next section, we will explore how one might rebel against these unseen consequences, how to break free from memory's invisible grip and reclaim autonomy over perception, choice, and identity. Here, the path forward seems counterintuitive, but it is precisely in the paradox that liberation lies. What if the very faculty that binds you, the relentless, unyielding memory, could become the instrument of your liberation? It sounds paradoxical, almost cruelly ironic, yet the path to freedom does not lie in erasing the past, nor in pretending it does not exist. To break free, one must first confront the memory that seems to imprison you, recognize its patterns, and transform it from a tyrant into a guide. The first step is radical awareness. Most people live unconsciously within the labyrinth of memory, unaware of how it shapes thoughts, behaviors, and choices. The man who remembers every moment is often hyper-aware of events, but unaware of the underlying patterns, the subtle emotional currents, the unspoken judgments, the recurring triggers. By observing memory not as a static archive, but as a dynamic participant in consciousness, he begins to disentangle the past from the present. This is the essence of Jungian shadow work, recognizing the hidden forces within, acknowledging them without judgment, and integrating them into conscious awareness. Consider historical figures who mastered their inner landscapes. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, practiced a disciplined form of reflection. He cataloged events, assessed emotional responses, and consciously reframed experiences to align with virtue rather than resentment. Nietzsche, too, spoke of a more fatty, loving one's fate, embracing all that has happened, even suffering, as essential to becoming. The lesson is not to forget, but to transform the grip of memory through intentional perspective. Every remembered slight, every ache of betrayal, becomes raw material for growth rather than chains. This process requires radical self-compassion. The man who remembers everything often internalizes every mistake and every hurt as personal failure. By cultivating self-compassion, he loosens the hold of judgment, both toward himself and toward others. Modern psychology validates this approach. Self-compassion reduces rumination, mitigates the stress of hypermemory, and provides a lens through which one can interpret the past without being crushed by it. Compassion does not negate accountability. It reframes memory as data rather than indictment. Next comes the art of selective engagement. While memory cannot be turned off, the mind can be trained to prioritize and contextualize recollections. Meditation, mindfulness, and journaling are not mere wellness exercises. They are tools for the disciplined navigation of memory. When a past event resurfaces, rather than being swept into automatic emotional reaction, it is observed, named, and consciously evaluated. This transforms memory from a tyrant into a teacher. Every vivid recollection becomes a guidepost, not a trap, offering insight into recurring patterns and hidden vulnerabilities. Paradoxically, freedom also requires deliberate forgetting, or more accurately, deliberate letting go. Nietzsche spoke of active forgetting, the purposeful disengagement from experiences that no longer serve growth. For the man who remembers everything, This does not mean erasing memories, but relinquishing the emotional charge they carry. Trauma, resentment, and guilt have power only when their presence dictates current choices. By consciously deciding which memories will shape action and which will remain passive, one reclaims sovereignty over the present. There is also a social dimension to rebellion. Hypermemory distorts relationships when others cannot meet the silent demands of perfect recall. Rebellion entails honest communication, boundary setting, and the recognition that memory is personal, not public. The man must learn to separate his internal archive from external expectations, allowing relationships to breathe unburdened by the exhaustive ledger of past interactions. This is counterintuitive. One might expect that remembering everything guarantees fairness or justice, yet liberation often requires forgiveness, tolerance, and detachment, not for others, but for the self. Historical examples underscore the transformative power of perspective. Viktor Frankl survived the concentration camps not because he forgot, but because he reinterpreted experience through meaning. Each memory of suffering became a testament to resilience and purpose rather than endless despair. Similarly, individuals who navigate hypermemory successfully do not escape the past. They transmute it, turning relentless recollection into insight, strategy, and self-knowledge. The rebellion is not erasure, it is mastery. Finally, the ultimate shift is existential. True liberation emerges when memory is no longer an obstacle to presence. The man who remembers everything begins to act not as a prisoner of past events, but as a conscious participant in life. He embraces imperfection, acknowledges the limits of control, and recognizes that identity is not static but emergent. Every memory remains, yet its power to constrain is diminished. In this state, memory ceases to be a tyrant and becomes an ally, a repository of wisdom rather than a chain of regret. This rebellion is radical because it defies instinct. The mind wants to react, to catalog, to judge, to preserve every detail with absolute fidelity. Yet liberation demands a higher-order response. Observation over reaction, integration over suppression, and meaning over resentment. It is a philosophical insurgency against the tyranny of one's own consciousness, and it is achievable through awareness, compassion, reframing, and selective engagement with the past. In the final section, we will confront the deepest realization, the ultimate truth hidden within memory, identity, and consciousness. It is a revelation so profound that it reframes not only how one interacts with the past, but how one inhabits the present, and even glimpses the future. Here, the rebellion finds its culmination in insight, and freedom is revealed not as an escape from memory, but as its transcendence. Imagine standing at the edge of memory, looking back at every moment you've carried, every detail that has shaped your life. Now imagine a strange clarity, the realization that memory, for all its precision, is not the master of your existence. You are. The ultimate truth is not about remembering or forgetting, not about perfect recall or selective amnesia. It is that freedom does not come from controlling memory. It comes from transcending its dominion. Every memory you hold is a lens through which you perceive reality, yet none are absolute. Each recollection is colored by emotion, context, and interpretation, woven into a narrative that is simultaneously truthful and deceptive. To live fully, you must recognize that the past is not a cage but a canvas. The man who remembers everything can paint with every shade of experience, pain and joy, betrayal and love, yet he need not be consumed by it. The memories remain, but their authority over his life dissolves. Jung spoke of individuation, the lifelong process of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of the psyche. This is the final revelation. The hidden factors that once trapped consciousness are not enemies but guides, revealing the shadow that must be acknowledged to achieve wholeness. Each vivid memory is an invitation to understand yourself more deeply, to confront the impulses and fears you ignored, to weave meaning from chaos. Liberation lies not in forgetting the past, but in embracing it fully, with insight and acceptance. And yet, there is a paradoxical serenity in this realization. To transcend memory is to live in the present with awareness, to act without the invisible chains of prior moments, and to engage with life without the relentless self-surveillance that once dictated every choice. The past informs, but it no longer confines. Pain can become wisdom, regret can become direction, and joy can be fully experienced without fear of loss. This is the ultimate truth. Consciousness is not bound by memory. It is the canvas upon which memory paints. To remember everything is not a curse, but a profound opportunity. To live consciously, to shape meaning, and to move through the world with both the weight of awareness and the lightness of freedom. In the stillness of this understanding, one sees that liberation is not an act of erasure, but of reconciliation. Memory and self are not adversaries, they are partners in the intricate dance of existence. And when the mind finally perceives this, every remembered moment becomes a stepping stone rather than a shackle, guiding the soul toward wholeness, insight, and the quiet power of living fully here and now.